Good evening from Riga, Latvia. Good morning in America. My name is Jānis Joņins. I am support engineer in UgCS support team. My everyday tasks is checking support emails and service desk. I am also taking active participation in testing new features, new releases. Also trying to move suggestions from customers received in support desk to development. Today I will tell about new features in UgCS version 3.5 and in upcoming release 3.6. For all participants, please post your questions in Q&A section. My colleagues Kristaps, Sergey, Dmitris, and Alexei will try to answer them today online, but questions that we will not be able to answer today, we will post them answered together with video recording. Also, please in chat, if you write something, there is an option to select the chat is received by all panelists and all attendees. By default, this option is only panelists. So let's begin. As I told, I will show you the new features of UgCS 3.5. This release was published today. It is available for download from ugcs.com. Also, we have released a new version of UgCS for DJI mobile application, 2.2.21. In this mobile application release is integrated support for latest DJI SDK. It includes support for Android 10 devices. And new version is available from Google Play already. In 3.5, we have changed one of our tools, and there are new features for it, so I will show them to you. And that is Facade scan tool. I hope many of you are already familiar with it, but I will explain some basics of it and also show the new options that are available with this tool. I will create a sample route for quadcopter running Ardupilot. I have running Ardupilot simulator on my virtual machine. And before getting to Facade scan, I'd like to mention some changes in main route settings. You have probably noticed that here is a new section, takeoff point altitude above ground in meters. Previously, this option was available from menu under the globe icon here. So now it is in main road properties. This option is necessary to select if you are performing a drone takeoff from some obstacle above the ground, like from building, rooftop, or from level below the ground. That may be in cases when the elevation data is outdated and actual elevation is below the elevation data that is in UgCS. So if takeoff is performed above the ground, you just specify a positive value here. If below, then a negative value. Also, a bit has changed interface for return to home altitude. The default settings is 50 meters, but you might like to reduce them if your flight altitude is less than 50 meters and you see there are no obstacles on the altitude you are flying. So you can maybe reduce it to 30 meters if your flight is 20 meters. So the drone doesn't have to ascend to 50 meters to return home. The rest of the settings are the same like they were before. So my personal suggestion is create a waypoint simple waypoint at the location where you will perform drone takeoff always. So the drone performs the takeoff to some safe altitude. Usually I personally use 20 meters. And I am adding usually the wait action for this waypoint. For example, some 5 seconds or 10 seconds. This is nice option to see that everything is fine with your drone hardware. So the drone performs the takeoff and it hovers at this first waypoint, and you see that there are no problems with altimeter, the GPS is not floating. And then you can start planning your route. So for facade scan, we select the facade scan tool. And we have to place a start point for flight plan for facade scan. The first point is A, and in previous versions, the second point was B, and that was all for the facade scan segment. And if you wanted to create another one, you had to again set A and B for another segment. Now it's possible to continue this facade scan route simply by creating the shape for the flight that you'd like to perform. After you have created this pattern, you click enter. And the flight would be calculated. I see an error in my UgCS. I have selected the drone profile, which doesn't have the camera payload. So I'll quickly add one. To create facade scan route, camera profile for drone is mandatory because route calculation is done based on camera settings to meet expected image overlaps. So the route is created. Red arrow shows the direction of the drone, where drone will be facing its forward when it during the flight. And now you can adjust necessary flight altitude, first setting minimum height. So it affects the bottom line of the flight, and maximum height. This will affect the top of the line. Distance to facade. This is the distance from this vertical path to the object that you want to capture in the images. So based on this distance and camera profile settings is calculated the flight path to meet the overlap for images. Default distance in UgCS is 10 meters, and that is minimum that we recommend to fly. In some cases, might be it's even better to use some longer distance. But 10 meters, it's the optimal, because if you choose closer distance, you need to remember that standard GPS accuracy is floating, and sometimes it can start float up to 2-3 meters, and flying some 2 meters from facade in higher altitude and in windy conditions, it can be pretty dangerous. So for safety, we suggest evaluate very accurate, see how you set this parameter. The next settings are for target image overlap. So by changing forward overlap, it basically changes the time between each image capture, and the side overlap, it will change the distance between the lines. You see, as we set higher overlap, the distance between lines becomes shorter. And also it's possible to select vertical and horizontal flight path. And also adjust the speeds. This 5 meters per second, those are default values. Depending on overlap on the speed, you might need to adjust to meet the ability of camera writing down the images. Most of the cameras can capture and save to SD card 1 image per 3 seconds. So reducing the speed, you'll ensure that all the images are captured and saved. With too high speed, it's possible that you will not get all the images captured. So the next new thing about Facade scan. Previous version, the bottom line was created parallel to the horizon. It was the lowest point was the minimum at minimum altitude, and if the facade scan segment was created on a sloppy surface, so the other side of facade scan segment could be at much higher altitude. Now facade scan is following the terrain, the elevation data, and the bottom line is created on specified minimum altitude, and the rest of flight path is also created according to this altitude. This feature has been implemented as we have received requests for our customers who are creating scans of vertical objects not only the buildings, but for example, open pit walls flying above the roads, where elevation is changing. This would be all about facade scan. I hope that you have noticed the changes, and for those who haven't been familiar with this tool, I have explained it more or less understandable. I will launch now the simulator and perform flight for this road. And during that, I will explain how works new road resume functionality. So this is a standard dialog for road upload. And previously, road was just uploaded. Now there are options to choose between starting road from the beginning, or you can specify the waypoint number from which you would like to start the road. The option Takeoff to road's first waypoint enables the drone first will perform takeoff to first waypoint. In this road case, it's the waypoint which I created with 5 seconds wait action. So you can ensure that everything's fine with the drone. And so you can specify the waypoint number, or you can start from road from the beginning. Sorry, something wrong with this one. I'm sorry. It's like always. I spent today all the day setting up these simulators, but still it fails. I hope I will be able to start them. Okay, now it goes. To enable easier road to resume after you have called the drone home, for example, for battery change or for any other reason. Previously, it was possible only specifying the exact waypoint number. Now it's possible to resume it from the exact point where a road was interrupted previously, when you flight previously. Still some problems with simulator. You can see on the screen there's a little green pass. So it's right now on the screen you can see which part of the road drone has already completed, and after road resume, drone will continue from exact that location, and it will not be necessary to specify a waypoint. This option to specify waypoint it still remains, because sometimes with some sensors you would want to resume a road from earlier stage than you finished before. I will give a last chance for this Ardupilot simulator. If it will not work, then I will continue with the other topics and show it at the end with the DJI drone. Well, as the drone managed to fly this short distance, during the upload, the dial has changed. So there's an option, continue route, start route from the beginning, start route from a specific waypoint, and also this option to do first, to proceed to the road through the first waypoint. So I'll choose a continue route option without takeoff to the first waypoint. I hope that everything will go fine now. It's expected the drone first reaches the altitude of the target point where road has to be resumed, and then proceeds in the straight line to the last position on the road it was before. No, sorry, it doesn't work. Okay, I'll continue with the agenda. So the next new tool that I'd like to show is corridor mapping. This is a feature that was requested by our customers already a long time ago, but it took pretty much of developers' time to find a safe solution that would be easy to use. So the basics are the same. For this one, I will just use the emulator. So the corridor mapping tool, this is this sign. Like a snake. And usage is actually very simply. By double clicking on the map, you select the points through which the drone should proceed. There is created this yellow area. This is expected camera footprint, the area which will be captured in images. When you have done with marking the area, you just press enter and specify desired ground resolution. Ground resolution, this is the same parameter that is used in photogrammetry. So it's a target resolution of image that you will get on your camera, centimeters per pixel. And the flight path is calculated based on ground resolution on specific payload camera settings. The options that can be adjusted for the road. So the first one is how wide would be the area that is captured. Decreasing this number is decreased the flight path necessary. So with the minimum settings, there will be only one line. Increasing this parameter, we get wider area and also more parallel flight lines. Flight speed, again, the flight speed should be matched with your camera, how fast the camera can capture the images, not to exceed images per second, and also to keep flight smooth and get crisp images, it might be necessary to reduce the flight speed. Forward overlap for images and the side overlap. Also, adjusting the side overlap, you get more parallel lines. Above the ground tolerance, this is for areas with a larger elevation change. You can set this very accurate, but if there are changes in elevation, there will be created additional waypoints. And you may want to reduce this count of additional waypoints, allowing the drone to not follow so accurately the ground elevation. Altitude modes, AMSL, to keep constant altitude above sea level. And in this case, it will exceed. Yes, it will exceed the flight parameters, so I'll change it back to AGL. And at the bottom, you can add camera actions. So the default action is camera trigger by distance. And then you can add the yaw for camera, change camera vertical angle. For the quadcopter, there is no, for emulators, there is no option to change camera altitude. So I will not add an action. This flight path is created the way that drone will, after finishing the route, it will come back to the point where it started. but in some different cases, it's possible that the finish of the route will be on the other side of the corridor. For DJI drones, uploading such route, you will get a message. You can get the message that distance between adjacent waypoints is exceeded. The maximum distance between first and last waypoint is allowed 2,000 meters. If you still want to fly such route, it will require to create additional waypoints back to the back to the starting position. Sorry, I am a bit nervous, but that will show how quickly can be created this route path. So we select simple waypoint tool. And make the route back to your takeoff location. If you would like to take control over the drone at the other end of the corridor, you can add the wait action at this waypoint. For example, let's say 180 seconds. So there are drone will finish the route, proceed to this waypoint, and stay there for 3 minutes. So if you are driving to the other side of the corridor, you can reach the drone and take control over manually and land it on the other side. So I hope I have explained everything about the corridor mapping. After some moment, I'll probably check the chat and the Q&A. Maybe I have forgotten something. I hope not. So the next thing, new features that is implemented, that will be implemented in the UgCS version 3.6 is terrain following for Ardupilot drones based on the Rangefinder. Ardupilot drones support Rangefinder, some laser altimeters, and yeah, basically laser altimeters already for a while. Now we have implemented the support for this feature also in UgCS. This can be used for all type of flights. It is very recommended and very useful for flights on lower altitudes because of GPS floating and barometers possible floating. So long flights on, for example, 5 or 10 meters above the ground level, the drone may start, altitude may start floating, and there are some safety risks. With laser altimeter, drone will have all the time the real altitude towards the ground. And also in the areas where there is no accurate elevation data. This would help to maintain permanent altitude above the ground when using, for example, photogrammetry. Depending on laser sensors used, the maximum altitude can be, it depends on the device, but if I'm not wrong, it can be even more than 100 meters. So I'll show the example with an area scan. So we create area scan segment. It already is created in a rangefinder mode. So there's a parameter altitude mode for all type of Ardupilot waypoints containing now 3 modes. Previously, it was only AMSL and AGL, and now there's also a rangefinder. Rangefinder means that starting from this point, drone autopilot is taking altitude data from the rangefinder. It can be used for all the road. It can be also at the beginning you can fly, for example, AGL, and from next segment or next waypoint, you can change the altitude type to rangefinder, specify necessary flight altitude, creating next waypoints or using some next tool. It is possible also to keep the same altitude mode or change to AGL. The only rule is that turn type must be straight to use the rangefinder. It doesn't require any additional settings on the UgCS side. So if the rangefinder is configured properly, so you just upload the route and the drone will perform the flight according to rangefinder data. Unfortunately, the simulator with rangefinder is not working, so I will not be able to show how the drone it performs the flight. But on simulator, it actually looks like just like this, the same like using any other type of altitude mode. And the last thing I would like to show is long-awaited UgCS for DJI application version for iOS devices. I will need some minute to connect my iPhone and start streaming from it. This is the first version of UgCS for DJI application iOS version. I will explain the interface quickly. The main things, if you have been working with Android application, will probably be familiar. So starting from the left upper corner, near the UgCS logo, there is this green dot. It identifies connection with UgCS desktop software. If this dot is in a red color, then UgCS desktop is not connected. As soon as application is connected to the UgCS desktop, the point turns green. For connection, can be used hotspot created on the iPhone, on iOS device, some dedicated Wi-Fi router, or also hotspot can be created on computer running UgCS. The next icon is a small drone icon, with also a green dot, which identifies that the drone is connected. Status of memory card, number of visible satellites. Right now, I'm in the building, so there are no satellites visible, and it shows 0. Battery percentage for remote controller. Battery percentage for drone battery. In the bottom, there's distance from the drone to remote controller, drone altitude above the ground, and flight speed. The ball icon, it shows it gives access to the notifications and warnings. So warnings can be just all cleared, or if some message appears on the display, you can hold the finger for some second, and if that is just a warning message, it will disappear. Camera settings. So depending on the drone model, can be adjusted settings for the image, settings for video. Also, it's possible to format memory card and also drone's internal memory storage from the application. From menu, you can turn on the simulator. DJI simulator. There are drone specific settings like drone actions that should be performed on signal loss, maximum flight distance, gimbal work mode, flight speeds, minimum altitude. Option to enable camera preview from the drone on your iOS device. Map providers. Currently, it's possible to choose between Google Maps or disabling maps at all. And here's the version information, network status, access to log files, and a link to terms of usage. This is this is a Mavic Zoom connected in simulator mode to UgCS desktop. This is our test site where we are performing our test flights. It's a real location. So I'll create just a short route. So this will be simple area scan route. this time simulator doesn't fail me. And well, the route is uploaded. Sorry, I forgot you were not able to see my UgCS desktop screen, but route upload is going pretty fast, faster than on Android devices. So from desktop application, I'm starting flight in manual mode. In auto mode, sorry. So it's possible to zoom in, zoom out the map, and watch how the drone is performing the flight. During the flight, you can switch through from single image to video mode. Capture images, start video recording. So these are the basic options right now, but our development team is working fast on the development, and soon the application should contain most of the features that already Android application has. So I guess this is it for the things I wanted to tell. I'm sorry, it was a bit clumsy and something failed. This is my first time. Please don't judge me too hard. I will check now questions and answers. Maybe I can answer some questions right now online. But as I mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, we will review the questions and post answers to them together with the video. Now I will switch back to UgCS desktop, show route resume functionality. So this is a thing that I wasn't able to do with Ardupilot. Right now I have put the simulator on hold. So as you can see, the area, the road which drone has already passed is colored in darker green color. And well, I will let the drone continue to the mid of the line. And now press return home. So you can see where drone was left the road, and it's possible to resume the road from the same place until you make any changes to the road. If you unlock the road and adjust any settings, it will not be possible anymore to resume from the same position. But if you restart the drone, or even you close UgCS, next time when you start, you still will have this path where the drone was at the last moment. This functionality was introduced already in the UgCS 3.4 and mobile application version 2.19, but there was an issue that wrote this following was not working if the signal between the remote controller and drone was lost. Development made an investigation and developed a fix, and now also in case Also, in case a connection during the flight is lost with the drone, when connection is obtained again, this route will be marked as processed. So now I press the upload, and so here are these options: continue route, start from beginning, start from certain waypoint, and continue any option with road continuing through the first waypoint. So I'll choose just continue the road. So mission is uploaded, and press auto mode. So I see that there was the question, what is Rangefinder? Rangefinder is how it's called laser altimeter in Ardupilot glossary. Currently, Ardupilot, as far as I know, it doesn't support other kind of rangefinders, for example, which are based on radio or something like that. So only the laser altimeters are an option now. And on the screen, so the drone is continuing the flight, and next sections are colored. And if now I press return home, it will again be the same. So I hope this feature really makes your work and life easier. Now this really is all. So I'll quickly check Q&A section. I see the questions are, what is the maximum distance between the first waypoint and the drone takeoff using iOS application? Now, also for Android application, there is done calculation for the altitudes, and there is no anymore 30 meters restriction. It is strongly recommended, as I mentioned already earlier, that you create first waypoint as close as possible to your takeoff location. It is always possible to adjust this waypoint location. I will show now how it can be done to already created route. The reason why it's recommended is because for all DJI drones, the flight calculation is pretty complicated, and one of parameters which drone knows for sure is the altitude of the location where it performed takeoff. If you perform the takeoff from different locations than is first waypoint, and this location has much different altitudes at ground level of the first waypoint, there is possible safety risks. Application is recalculating this, but like any calculations, there are security risks, so it's strongly recommended to set this waypoint as close as possible. This route which I just showed, so I will adjust now the first waypoint. This the first waypoint, if you select just if you create simple waypoint as a first, you can freely move it around. If it would be area scan, it wouldn't be so easy. So in case of area scan, now I will delete my simple waypoints. I left only area scan. In this case, area scan starts from opposite side. But for example, I would like to launch the drone from this home location. So there is a modifier tool. It's called modifier, which you select, and it allows to insert the tool or waypoint before the currently selected waypoint. For me now it is area scan. So I ensure that here the number here is now 1 of 1, but in case of the larger road, it will be 1 of something. You select the first one, select the modifier road, and then select the waypoint tool and double click. And in the location is created waypoint, which you can move around and you can place it near the actual location of the drone. I understand it can be complicated if you plan the road in office, but you perform flight on the field, and it's not so easy to operate with the computer on the field, but it must be easy enough to move this around. Okay, I see that most of the questions are answered already by my colleagues, but we will copy these questions, answers. Maybe we will update them, and we will publish them after some time together with webinar recording. Webinar was recorded. It will be edited. The clumsy parts of my speech will be cut out, but the main content will be left, and it will be published on UgCS YouTube channel. Also answers to the questions, and maybe just one last thing I would like to show. This is directly related to questions and answers. We have created some time ago wiki.ugcs.com site. This is a place where we have gathered all the user manuals or all the documentation for UgCS software. Personally, there is not much my input, but there's a lot of input from my support colleagues Sergey and Dmitry, and they have created the frequently asked questions section. It's very possible that if there was some interesting question today, we will add them also to this section. There are how-to articles, and you are welcome to send in to support@ugcs.com some specific scenario that you would like to know how to create. And if we see it can be useful for larger amount of users, we will create a how-to article and place it on the site. And UgCS desktop manual and UgCS for DJI manual, they're also up to date on this site. So please use it, please send feedback and submit new questions. So thank you for participation. Thank you for questions. And we'll be waiting for your feedback and new suggestions.